Guys, it is me. I know this image is a little blurry, but this is on chapter 4. We're reading the Revenge of the Sith novel. I know it's been a while. I decided I wanted to read it because, like I said, I'm going to be gone for 3 days, so I'm going to be uploading content because I got a new book, which I'm going to be uploading that video as well. I'm going to be recording myself a lot. I'm going to be recording myself working on fan fictions while I'm gone as well because it's just for work, but I can't record there because I can't record. My laptop. I can't find my laptop charger. I've been looking for so long to find that thing. Can't find it. I've looked. I've tried chargers that I think would fit. It doesn't work. I'm gonna have to look it up, try and buy one. But anyways, I wouldn't be able to bring it with me. So I'm gonna start reading. We are on chapter 4. It is called Jedi Trap. I'm gonna read it. This is the death of Count Dooku. A starburst of clarity blossoms within Anakin Skywalker's mind when he says to himself, "Oh, I get it now," and discovers that the fear within his heart can be a weapon too. It is that simple and that complex, and it is final. Dooku's dead already. The rest is more detail. The play is still on. The comedy of lightsabers, flashes, and snaps and hisses. Dooku and Skywalker, a one-time only command performance for an audience of one. Jedi and Sith and Jedi spinning, whirling, crashing, together slashing, chopping, parrying, binding, slipping and ripping the air around them with snarls of power. And all for nothing, because a nuclear flame has consumed Anakin Skywalker's Jedi restraint, and fear becomes fury without effort, and fury is a blade that makes his lightsaber into a toy. The play goes on, but the suspense is over. It has become more pantomime and intricate and as meaningless as the space-time curves that guide galactic clusters through a measureless cosmos. Dooku's decades of combat experience are irrelevant. His mastery of swordplay is useless. His vast wealth, his political influence, impeccable breeding, immaculate manners, exquisite taste, all the pursuits and points of pride to which he has devoted so much of his time and attention over the long, long years of his life, are now chains hung upon his spirit, bending his neck before the axe. Even his knowledge of the Force has become a joke. It is this knowledge that shows him his death, makes him handle it, turn it this way, and that in his mind examine it in detail like a black gemstone, so cold it burns. Dooku's elegant farce has degenerated into pathetic melodrama, and not one shed tear will mark the passing of a tear. But for Anakin, in the fight there is only terror and rage. Only he stands between death and the two men he loves best in all the world, and he can no longer afford to hold anything back. That imaginary dead star dragon tries its best to freeze away his strength, to whisper to him that Dooku has beaten him before, that Dooku has all the power of the darkness, to remind him how Dooku took his hand, how Dooku could strike down even Obi-Wan himself seemingly without effort, and now Anakin is all alone and he will never be a match for any Lord of the Sith. But Palpatine's words, rage is your weapon, have given Anakin permission to unseal the shielding around his furnace heart, and all his fears and all his doubts shrivel in its flame. When Count Dooku flies at him, blade flashing, Watto's fist cracks out from Anakin's childhood to knock the Sith Lord tumbling back. With all the power that the dark side could draw from throughout the universe, Dooku hurls a jagged fragment of a durasteel table. Shmi Skywalker, gentle murmur, "I knew you would come for me, Anakin," smashes it aside. His head has been filled with the smoke from his smothered heart for far too long. It has been the thunder that darkens his mind on Argonar on Jabim, in the Tusken camp on Tatooine. That smoke had clouded his mind, had blinded him, and left him flailing in the dark, a mindless machine of slaughter. But here now, within this ship, this microscopic cell of life in the infinite, sterile desert of space, his firewalls have opened so that the terror and the rage are out there in the fight instead of in his head, and Anakin's mind is clear as a crystal bell. In that pristine clarity, there's only one thing he must decide. So he does. He decides to win. He decides that Dooku should lose the same hand he took. Decision is reality. Here, his blade moves simultaneously with his will, and blue fire vaporizes black Corellian nano silk and disintegrates flesh and shears bone, and away falls the Sith Lord's lightsaber hand, trailing smoke that tastes charred meat and burnt hair. The hand falls with the bar of scarlet blaze still extending from its spastic death grip, and Anakin's heart sings for the fall of that red blade. He reaches out and the Force catches it for him, and then Anakin takes Dooku's other hand as well. Dooku crumples to his knees, face blank, mouth slack, and his weapon it whirs through the air to the victor's hand, and finds his vision for the future happening before his eyes. Two blades at Count Dooku's throat. But here, now, the truth belies in the dream. Both lightsabers are in his hands, and the one in his hand of flesh flares with the synthetic bloodshine of a Sith blade. Dooku, shrinking with dread, still finds some hope in his heart that he is wrong, that Palpatine has not betrayed him, that this has all been proceeding according to plan until he is good, Anakin, good. I knew you could do it, and registers this is Palpatine's voice, and feels within the darker depths of all he is the approach of the words that are to come next. Kill him. Palpatine says, kill him now. In Skywalker's eyes, he sees only flames. Chancellor, please, he gasps, desperate and helpless, his aristocratic demeanor invisible, his courage only a bitter memory. He is reduced to begging for his life, as so many of his victims have. Please, you promised me immunity. We had a deal. Help me. And his begging gains him a share of mercy equal to that which he has dispensed. A deal only if you released me, Palpatine replies, cold as intergalactic space. Not if you use me as bait to kill all my friends. And he knows then that all has indeed been going according to plan, Sidious's plan, not his own. This had been a Jedi trap indeed, but Jedi were not the quarry, they were the bait. Anakin Palpatine says quietly, finish him. Years of Jedi training make Anakin hesitate. He looks down upon Dooku and sees not a Lord of the Sith, but a beaten, broken, cringing old man. I shouldn't. When Palpatine barks, do it. Now. Do it. Now. Do it. No. Anakin realizes that this isn't actually an order. That it is, in fact, nothing more than what he's been waiting for his whole life. Permission. And Dooku, as he looks up into the eyes of Anakin Skywalker for the final time, Count Dooku knows that he has been deceived not just today, but for many, many years. That he has never been the true apprentice. That he has never been the heir to the power of the Sith. He has been only a tool. His whole life, all his victories, all his struggles, all his heritage, all his principles and his sacrifices, everything he's done, everything he owns, everything he's been, all his dreams and grand vision for the future empire and the army of Sith had been only a pathetic sham, because all of him add up only to this. He has existed only for this, to be the victim of Anakin Skywalker's first cold-blooded murder. First, but not, he knows the last. Then the blades crossed at his throat, and his throat uncrossed like scissors, snip, and all of him becomes nothing at all. Murderer, and murdered, each stared blindly, but only the murderer blinked. Oh, he did that. The severed heads. The severed head's stare was fixed on something beyond living sight. The desperate plea in place on its lips echoed silence. The headless torso collapsed with a slowly fading sigh from the cauterized gape of its trachea, folding forward at the waist as though making obeisance before the power that had ripped away its life. The murderer blinked again. Who am I? Was he the slave? boy on a desert planet, valued for his astonishing gift with machines? Was he the legendary pod racer, the only human to survive that deadly sport? Was he the unruly, high-spirited, trouble-prone student of a great Jedi Master? The star pilot, the hero, the lover, the Jedi? Could he be all these things? Could he be any of them and still have done what he has done? But he is already discovering the answer at the same time that he has finally realized that he needed to ask the question. The deck bucked at the cruiser, absorbed a new barrage of torpedoes and turbo laser fire. Dooku severed, staring ahead, bounced along the deck and rolled away, and Anakin woke up. What? He'd been having a dream. He'd been flying and fighting again, and somehow in the dream, he could do whatever he wanted. In the dream, whatever he did was the right thing to do, simply because he wanted to do it. In the dream, there were no rules. There was only power, and the power was his. Now he stood over a headless corpse that he couldn't bear to see, but he couldn't make himself look away, and he knew it hadn't been a dream at all, that he'd really done this. The blades were still in his hands in the ocean of wrong he dived into had close over his head, and he was drowning. The dead man's lightsabers tumbled from his loosening fingers. I couldn't stop myself. And before the words left his lips, he heard how hollow and obvious was the lie. You did well, Anakin. Palpatine's voice was warm as an arm on Anakin's shoulders. You did not only well, but right. He was too dangerous to leave alive. From the Chancellor, this sounded true, but when Anakin repeated inside his head, he knew that Palpatine's truth would be one he could never make himself believe. A tremor that began between his shoulder blades threatened to expand into a full case of the shakes. He was an unarmed prisoner. That was a simple, unbearable fact. That was truth. Though it burned him like his own lightsaber, truth was something he could hang on to, and somehow it made him feel a little better, a little stronger. He tried another truth, not that he couldn't have stopped himself, but I shouldn't have done that, he said, and now his voice came out solid and simple and final. Now he could look at the corpse at his feet. He could look at the severed head. He could see them for who they were, for what they were, a crime. He'd become a war criminal. Guilt hit him like a fist. He felt it, a punch to his heart that smacked breath from his lungs and buckled his knees. It hung on his shoulders like a yoke of collapsium, an invisible weight beyond his mortal strength, crushing his life. There were no words in him for this. All he could say was, it was wrong. And that was the sum of it, right there. It was wrong. Nonsense. Disarming him was nothing. He had powers beyond your imagination. Anakin shook his head. That doesn't matter. It's not the Jedi way. The ship shuddered again, and the lights went out. Have you ever noticed the Jedi way? Palpatine said. Invisible now within the stark shadow of the general's chair isn't always the right way. Anakin looked toward the shadow. You don't understand. You're not a Jedi. You can't understand. Anakin, listen to me. How many lives have you just saved with this stroke of a lightsaber? Can you count them? But it wasn't wrong, Anakin. It may not be the Jedi way, but it was right. Perfectly natural. He took your hand. You wanted revenge, and your revenge was justice. Revenge is never just. It can't be. Don't be childish, Anakin. Revenge is the foundation of justice. Justice began with revenge, and revenge is still the only justice some beings can ever hope for. After all, this is hardly your first time, is it? You do could deserve mercy more than the sad people who tortured your mother to death. That was different. In the Tusken camp, he had lost his mind. He had become a force of nature, indiscriminate, killing them with no more thought of it or intention than a sand gale. The Tuskens had been killed, slaughtered, massacred, but that had been beyond his control, and now it seemed to him as if it had been done by someone else. Like a story he had heard that had little to do with him at all. But Dooku had been murdered by him on purpose. Here in the general's quarters, he had looked into the eyes of a living being and coldly decided to end that life. He could have chosen the right way. He could have chosen the Jedi way. but instead he stared at Dooku's severed head. He could never unchoose this choice. He could never take it back, as Master Windu liked to say, there is no such thing as a second chance. And he wasn't even sure he wanted one. He couldn't let himself think about this, just as he didn't let himself think about the dead on Tatooine. He put his hand to his eyes, trying to rub away the memory. You promised we would never talk about that again, and we won't, just as we need never speak of what has happened here today. It was as though the shadow itself spoke kindly. I have always kept your secrets, have I not? Yes, of course, Chancellor, but Anakin wanted to crawl away into a corner somewhere. He felt sure that if things would just stop for a while, an hour, a minute, he could pull himself together and find some way to keep moving forward. He had to keep moving forward. Moving forward was all he could do, especially when he couldn't stand to look back. The view wall behind the general's chair blossomed with looping ion spirals of inbound missiles. The shuddering of the ship built itself into a continuous quake, gathering magnitude with each hit. Anakin, my restraints, please, the shadow said. I'm afraid this ship is breaking up. I don't think we should be aboard when it does. In the force of field signatures on the magnetic locks on the Chancellor's shackles were as clear as text saying, unlock me like this. A simple twist of Anakin's mind popped them open. The shadow grew ahead, then shoulders, then underwent a sudden mitosis that left the general's chair standing behind and turned its other half into the Supreme Chancellor. Palpatine picked his way through the debris that littered the gloom-shrouded room, moving surprisingly quickly toward the stairs. Come along, Anakin. There was very little time. The view wall flared white with missiles impacts, and one of them must have damaged the gravity generators. The ship seemed to heel over, forcing Palpatine to clutch desperately at the banister and sending Anakin skidding down a floor that had suddenly become a 45-degree ramp. He rolled hard into a pile of rubble, shattering permacrete hydrofoam to reduce weight. Obi-Wan! He sprang to his feet and waved away the debris that had buried the body of his friend. Obi-Wan lay entirely still, eyes closed, dust-caked blood matting his hair where his scalp had split. Bad as Obi-Wan looked, Anakin had stood over the bodies of too many friends, on too many battlefields to be panicked by a little blood. One touch to Obi-Wan's throat confirmed the strength of his pulse, and that touch also let Anakin's force perception flow through the whole body of his friend. His breathing was strong and regular, and no bones were broken. This was a concussion, no more. Apparently, Obi-Wan's head was somewhat harder than the cruiser's interior walls. Leave him, Anakin. There is no time. Palpatine was half hanging from the banister, both arms wrapped around his stanchion. This whole spire may be about to break free. Then we'll all be adrift together. And Anakin glanced up at the Supreme Chancellor, and for that instant he didn't like the man at all. But then he reminded himself that, brave as Palpatine was, his was the courage of conviction. The man who was no soldier, he had no way of truly comprehending what he was asking Anakin to do. His fate, he said, in case Palpatine had not understood, will be the same as ours. With Obi-Wan unconscious and Palpatine waiting above, with responsibility for the lives of his two closest friends squarely upon him, Anakin found that he had recovered his inner balance. Under pressure and crisis, with no one to call upon for help, he could focus again. He had to. This was what he'd been born for, saving people. The Force brought Obi-Wan's lightsaber to his hand, and he clipped it to his friend's belt. Then hoisted a limp body over his shoulder and let the Force help him run up lightly up the steeply canted floor to Palpatine's side. Impressive, Palpatine said, but then he cast a significant gaze up at the staircase, which the vector of the artificial gravity had made into a vertical cliff. But what now? Before Anakin could answer, the erratic gravities swung like a pendulum. While they both clung to the railing, the room seemed to roll around them. All the broken chairs and table fragments and hunks of rubble slid toward the opposite side, and now, instead of of a cliff. The staircase had become a merely corrugated stretch of floor. People say Anakin nodded toward the door to the turbo lift lobby. When the Force closes the hatch, it opens a viewport after you. And that's the end of chapter 4. I mean, I read over 10 pages. I read up to page 92. There's a lot of pages in this book, and I'm going to be reading this book as much as I'm reading all these books. There's so many books that I bought. And now that we're done, I want to talk about this, and I want to talk about how in the movie Dooku didn't speak. He didn't say anything to stop himself, but he did in the book, which made no sense to me. Right? Like he said, but Chancellor, we had a deal and that stuff. I think that it made zero sense, the fact that he was speaking when he shouldn't have been, I guess. But I don't know. I think that I think that this was perfect. I think that this was great. I think that it was a great chapter that I read. I can't believe I read a whole chapter. It was only like 12 pages. So I think it was technically 11, maybe 12 pages. But I always read, as much, I like to read 10 pages of the book. I think we're going to start reading chapters now instead of 10 pages. Because I think it's fine. So, if you guys want more videos where I read these books, where I read Revenge of the Sith, I'm going to be reading more books once I finish this. So, if you guys want more, I'm going to be uploading as much as possible. I want to record as much as possible. I hope you guys enjoyed it. See you guys next one. Peace out.